Hi everyone, I'm Nicole Formosa, editor of Bike Magazine. I'm here with Kristen Butcher and Lacey Kemp, and we're in Marquette, Michigan, testing for the Bible of Bike Tests. Tonight we're talking about the Juliana Strega CR, which is C is the kind of lower level carbon, I guess you could say, but still full carbon bike. And R is the base build, $4,500. Strega is the women's version of the Nomad 4. They came out around the same time. 170 mil travel bike, so big girl.
Big girl.
The biggest girl there is, actually.
We didn't really have anything else super comparable this year to this bike.
Tested the Live Hail last year, which is
probably the closest thing we had.
Probably, the closest thing. This is a bike for, I feel like, for pretty specific, this is not like your all-arounder. This is not the bike that's, I mean, maybe for some people.
It's a bike I want to take to Whistler and ride in the park.
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of for a specific reason. It's not kind of like a do everything necessarily.
Yeah, and I think for being a big bike, this bike has some, you know, it has qualities of a big bike, but it has some redeeming qualities of a smaller bike as well. So for climbing, for instance, it definitely, you felt that it was a larger bike on some of the smoother climbs, and there was some bob. It was a bit of a slog, and our model had an NX drivetrain on it, so we were lacking that eagle, which we've kind of become accustomed to in some of these test bikes. Regardless, it still climbed reasonably well on some of that smoother terrain, I thought. And then when we got on the technical climbing, I found it to be actually better than I expected. Suspension open, I was able to get up and over a lot of things that...
Like good traction.
Yeah, good traction and surprisingly movable on some of the tougher terrain, which my climbing technical terrain is not my strong suit. So this was a surprise for me on this bike.
Yeah, I definitely feel like you sort of go in with one idea of how it might climb, and it's, for me, I thought was a lot better.
And compared to my experiences on the Hail last year, which again is a similar bike to this, I was pleasantly surprised. I felt like the front end didn't float up as much. It was just, and this bike is a little bit over 30 pounds. I believe it's a hair over 31 pounds without pedals. And for me, that made it a little bit easier to give it that extra oomph to get it over those bigger rocks that we have here.
And it's slack. I mean, 65-degree head tube angle, and you can run it in the low position. It has a geometry chip, which, what did you guys think about high and low? I didn't feel
I ran it high the whole time and had no problem on some of the bigger, chunkier features. I think if I were going to go, like, this is a bike that I would spend the season in the bike park on, I think. And if I were going to run it in Whistler, I would switch it to low because I'm not pedaling, I'm on a chairlift, right?
Yeah.
And then when it came to descending, I mean, it was a full-on sled. It was great.
Yeah.
It was like...
That's what this is made for.
I will say the one thing I was pleasantly surprised about was cornering on this bike. I'm like hyper excited about cornering right now, and this thing just like gripped like Velcro through tight corners and berms, and I just felt like I felt like I was dragging bar, even though I was probably standing up like an idiot. I was just like, I'm Mad Hunter. It felt so good.
But I felt the same way. I felt like this thing, the moment I got it up to speed and was pedaling just absolutely chaotically down really hairy stuff, that's where it felt right at home. And for me, it made me feel either feel very comfortable where my skills are at, or it made me feel like maybe my skills are a little bit better than they actually are. Either way,
it's inspiring.
It's a good crutch, definitely. It is a really good crutch for descending.
I agree with that too.
But then
the cornering, do you think that's the geometry? I mean, they've never had a female specific Nomad.
Yeah.
This is the first time they've done that, but there's been several versions of the Nomad, and they've changed it up quite a bit in this last version.
It might be a combination of the geometry. I really like the minions that come on the bike. I trust the tire, and I think it's a tire that I run constantly normally in life. So knowing I'm going into a corner, there might be some marbles. I felt like I could just lay into this bike more than some of the other bikes that we had. And it was a slightly longer bike as well, which could have had something to do with the fact that it stays really planted. So yeah, it felt really good. And then on those really fast descents, I mean, it was, you know, I've said this, I feel like a few times now, but like you can just kind of let it go and like roll with it, and it's just, you're just hanging on, like, woo, it felt really good.
But then as well as it rode at speed, I felt like this also really came to life on those slow technical descents where you're really picking your way through.
Yeah.
And sometimes on these bigger bikes, sometimes I can just feel
like you
the bike
ride
is
low in the
riding
travel.
me. Yeah, and this bike I felt like I still had a lot of the control. I was definitely planted down. I was able to pick my way and then zoom off.
I think the fact that it's kind of light helps you maintain that speed a little bit. It helps you be able to move the bike versus the bike moving you, kind of thing. One of the things I was going to mention was that a 170 mil travel bike, 2.4, 2.5 tire, I felt it was quite comparable to the Ibis Mojo HD4, which is a 160, 150 bike, 2.6 tire. So slightly less travel, slightly wider tire, different price point. We're at $4,500 on our base model here, on this model here.
Right.
And the Ibis that we tested was $5,700 with carbon wheels too. So I was wondering if you guys had opinions on less travel, wider tire.
And when we talked about this earlier, I had an immediate answer, and that immediate answer was just to pause for a really long time. Because it's a really difficult question to answer. They do ride very similarly. And when you weigh the pros and cons, it really starts to come down a lot to personal preference of whether or not you are okay with having those plus tires, whether you want different options, or whether you want something that's a little bit more standard and something that matches what we think of when it comes to an enduro bike.
So lastly, I guess $4,500, I mean, do you think this was pretty good spec for that? Is this something that you would, I guess, compared to other bikes?
I think for me, if I had a shorter travel trail bike at home to play around on the local trails, this is a bike I would consider buying for the park or for bigger days for sure, because it feels really good. And it's, as far as our, mountain biking is not a cheap sport, we all know this, but as far as what we have offered to us, I think it's a pretty good build for the $4,500.
Okay, well, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Bike Mag's YouTube channel to watch the rest of the Bible videos.